Hello everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, and in honor of the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris, I'm going to be holding the 2024 Solo Board Game Olympics. In this video, I've nominated my 16 favorite cannot live without board games, and they're going to compete against each other for gold, silver, and bronze medal. I've randomly seeded tonight's competitors, so let's begin with the Sweet 16 of my collection. Now this list of games is obviously subjective, and these are my personal favorites, which have been selected due to their either theme or gameplay mechanics, or just the scope of the game in general. So that is kind of the criteria that I'm using for this tournament. First up, we have two strong candidates, with This War of Mine hosting A Touch of Evil. This is going to be a tough race right out of the gates, but edging across the finish line is Flying Frog Productions' A Touch of Evil. Next up, we have two games that share a similar theme, Eldritch Horror and Fortune and Glory, with both games involving globetrotting and exploring mysterious locations. And crossing the finish line is Fantasy Flight's Eldritch Horror. We move on to Agents of Smersh versus Final Girl. Both games offer the solo gamer a great thematic experience, but pulling across the finish line is Agents of Smersh from 8th Summit Games. In our last matchup of the first bracket, we have Ghost Stories versus Shadows of Brimstone. Although each game offers the player a great thematic experience, it's Shadows of Brimstone finishing way ahead of its competitor. Next, we have two titles from smaller game producers. We have Black Orchestra versus Skeptics. Black Orchestra offers a great historical feel to the game, while Skeptics provides a stellar production values and theme. But in a photo finish, it's Black Orchestra by a nose. In our next matchup, we have two games coming from completely opposite genres, sports and war. We have Time of Soccer and Don't Tread on Me. But in this matchup, Don't Tread on Me takes a race by a safe margin of victory. Now we have a potential David and Goliath matchup as War of the Ring faces off against Police Precinct. But in what might be the greatest upset in gaming history, Police Precinct manages to edge out the giant by a nose. And in our last heat, we have Abomination leading off against 2 Minutes to Midnight. Although these games are in entirely different genres, they each pack a walloping punch in their own right. But with its vast strategic depth and replayability, it's 2 Minutes to Midnight that wins the match. Now we move on to the Elite Eight. First up is two powerhouses in their own right. We have A Touch of Evil versus Eldritch Horror. This one could literally be won by a coin flip, but the victory goes to A Touch of Evil. Next up is another David and Goliath matchup, and this time there's no surprise. It's Shadows of Brimstone by several lengths. Next up, we have two expertly designed games, each one simulating the events of two conflicts. We have Black Orchestra versus Don't Tread on Me. And it's Black Orchestra across the finish line. And in the final set of the Elite Eight, we have Police Precinct versus 2 Minutes to Midnight. This one comes down to theme and theme alone, as 2 Minutes to Midnight edges out Police Precinct in a close race. Now we move on to our final four, as A Touch of Evil takes on Shadows of Brimstone, both from Flying Frog Productions. And this time, nostalgia wins out as A Touch of Evil moves across the finish line in a tight race. Our last matchup of the final four, we have Black Orchestra versus 2 Minutes to Midnight. Although Black Orchestra wins in the production values, it's 2 Minutes to Midnight pushing across the finish line to victory. And now it's the match we've all been waiting for. In the finals, we have A Touch of Evil versus 2 Minutes to Midnight. Each title has been expertly crafted and features loads of theme. But it's A Touch of Evil that crosses the finish line first and is crowned the world champion of solo board games for 2024. And so our bronze medal is going to go to Shadows of Brimstone. The silver goes to 2 Minutes to Midnight, and our gold medal winner is A Touch of Evil. Now I realize these are very subjective matchups, and obviously the first pairings, you have a bracket of death there that is going to feature two very, very popular games, and you have to make a decision on one of the two, and that's how this worked out. But my gold medal winner is A Touch of Evil from Flying Frog Productions. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Solo Gamers Club, and I hope you enjoyed this little Olympic tournament of solo games. So this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club signing off and wishing everyone a pleasant evening. Good night.